On today's show, are the Houston Rockets under pressure to extend Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun as yet another member of the 2021 draft class receives his rookie scale max extension? Plus, Jabari Smith Jr. working out with Kevin Durant this offseason. What would a year 3 leap look like for Jabari? Plus, some housekeeping as the Rockets re-sign Nate Williams, Nate Hinton, and Jermaine Samuels Jr. ahead of NBA Summer League. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The comments help a ton. That's the best way you can help our show out. Swing by the YouTube channel, share your thoughts. Swing by, just say Go Rockets. It helps us out a bunch. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Oh boy, we're going to be hearing a lot about these contract extensions, negotiations, all this, all offseason long. But we got to revisit this topic now as yet another member of the 2021 NBA draft class, Franz Wagner, received his rookie scale maximum contract extension. What does that mean for Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun? Is there pressure building up for the Rockets front office to extend one of, if not both of those guys this offseason to kind of clear the air to erase any questions about their long-term standing within the organization? We're going to talk about each guy individually, as well as kind of what it means for the collective group, for the whole, as well as we're going to get to some other stuff a little bit later on in segment 3. Jabari Smith Jr. working out with Kevin Durant and some of the housekeeping stuff with the Rockets, bringing a few names back for Vegas Summer League. But let's start with the news. So the third member, the most recent member of the 2021 NBA draft class to receive his rookie scale max extension, Franz Wagner with the Orlando Magic. 5 years, $270 million. That's a lot of cheddar cheese for Franz Wagner. The third member of the class to receive his rookie max after first was Scotty Barnes, then Cade Cunningham. And we talked about this a little bit in a previous episode, so I apologize if this is a bit of a rehash, but I do think it's important because this is the kind of thing that, players see this, right? I'm sure Jalen and Sengun are looking at the Shams notifications, the Woj bombs, and like, man, Franz got his money. Like, when am I getting my extension, right? They probably want that. And there's the human element there where absolutely, I bet they would love to just guarantee themselves that money and just not have to worry about it in the future. And as a show of good faith from the organization, yes, hey, we believe in you. We're bought in. We want you here long term. We think you're a fixture of the organization. We think you're a cornerstone, a franchise player, all that. And unfortunately, only one of those two guys has earned that money at this point. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, Alperen Sengun has absolutely earned every bit of a rookie max deal. The issue is, again, the cap logistics and the reasons outside of just his production and, taking care of him as a player, as potentially your franchise guy, the ramifications for what it would mean for the Rockets financially a little bit further down the line. I do think when you look at all these teams, right, the Pistons have clearly identified Cade. The Raptors have clearly identified Scotty. Those are their franchise guys. Those are their cornerstones. The Magic feel very comfortable and confident in their duo of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner being their one, option one, option two guys down the line and building around those two guys. And that money, the contract extension for Franz, cements that into fact. And next summer 2025, literally like at 12:01 midnight, whenever Paolo Banchero is eligible to sign that rookie max, you bet your bottom dollar that the Magic will be waiting there, pen and paper in hand, begging for him to sign that extension because they are bought in on that future, that version of their team. For the Rockets, unfortunately, there's only one player that has done enough to justify inking that type of deal, and it's Alperen Sengun. Now, unfortunately for Alperen Sengun, relative to his draft slot and relative to the Rockets' financials, their future payroll costs and what they may or may not be able to achieve down the line, specifically next summer, he unfortunately is not going to be given that blank check, that max, whatever, because the Rockets are doing their due diligence and hopefully trying to maintain their optionality and trying to keep things open to be able to make something happen next summer. That's the right move if you're the Houston Rockets. What I don't want to see happen, and I really hope that Rafael Stone maintains, his position on this and that the Rockets don't cave last minute, even though Sengun has earned that extension. Absolutely. And he should be identified as a franchise building block, a cornerstone, all that. I don't want to see the Rockets front office cave under pressure from the players or from their representation, from their agents, to turn around and sign one, if not both, of those extensions just because other 2021 draft class members are receiving their rookie extensions, right? There's a very realistic possibility of some of the other names that are out there, right? We could see Evan Mobley receive his extension. We could see Josh Giddey receive his extension. Like, there are other names out there where the extensions might come to light. And then all it does is, as more and more of these extensions happen, all it does is provide more and more pressure and more ammunition, more leverage really for both Jalen and Sengun and their representation, their agents, to be blowing up Rafael Stone and the Rockets front office saying, where are our extensions, right? We've earned that. A little bit of a different argument for Jalen Green. But again, a lot of these extensions, sometimes these extensions are not only done based on, what you have produced, but also what your future possibilities of production include. I still maintain the argument and the point that I had in our previous episode, but Sengun's earned the extension. There's still some really major question marks surrounding Jalen Green, and that's why it feels like it'd be the wise choice to not extend Jalen Green for those reasons, for the question marks surrounding his game, make him earn the extension here in year 4. And then for Sengun, it's disappointing because, I can see the argument for just wanting to show, have a show of good faith, essentially, and just identify and point to Sengun and say, yes, we trust you. We identify you as a franchise cornerstone. We have faith in you. We have the utmost confidence in you. All that, basically everything that an extension would mean, aside from just the dollar figures, right? It means a lot to be able to identify that player and it show that the organization has that confidence in you moving forward. And it's unfortunate that the Rockets are in a position where they are, where Sengun and relative to his draft slot, the Rockets are able to have some financial wiggle room next summer by delaying his extension. They still have a little bit of wiggle room too by delaying Jalen Green's extension, but it's not nearly the same number as it is for Alperen Sengun. More on that here in just a second. We're gonna get real nerdy here in a minute with I got some Excel spreadsheets and stuff pulled up, and we're gonna walk through some of these numbers. But that's just the reality of the situation. So with that knowledge in hand, I want to try and tackle and explore some of the possibilities and what, some of the financial ramifications could be down the line for the Houston Rockets as it relates to these extension discussions and what the Rockets could or should or hopefully should not do as it relates to these guys and their contracts moving forward. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, we're going to get super nerdy with these numbers here for a moment in this segment as it relates to the contract extensions, the talks, all this stuff, and why the Rockets are approaching this situation the way they are approaching it. And again, I hope that they don't cave. I hope that they stand their ground. There's arguments on both sides, but let's go ahead and take a look at some of these numbers. So again, first off, revisiting, and this might be remedial for some, so I apologize, but what is a cap hold? So essentially, Jalen Green has his current rookie scale salary. Alperen Sengun has his. It's relative to their draft slot, right? So Jalen Green makes a lot more as the number 2 overall pick than Alperen Sengun does as the 16th overall pick. So if the Rockets elect not to extend either of them this offseason, then at the end of this next year, if they extend qualifying offers to these guys to make them restricted free agents, what it means is that they have a cap hold, which is a placeholder number on the Rockets' payroll spreadsheet, basically, for summer 2025. That number is quite a bit smaller for Sengun because he's making less on his current rookie salary than it is for Jalen Green. Jalen Green's cap hold is $31.2 million. Alperen Sengun's cap hold is $16.3 million. Now, the starting salary for a rookie scale max extension starts at $38.6 million. So the delta between their relative salaries, right? That's a $7.4 million difference from what Jalen Green's cap hold is to what his actual rookie scale max would be. And for Sengun, that's roughly a $22.3 million difference. So a pretty substantial, almost 3 times the amount of money from Sengun's cap hold to Jalen's cap hold, right? So I think that the argument here is, you know, Sengun has shown himself to be worthy and capable of being a franchise cornerstone talent, right? On par, on the same level as guys like Cade, Scotty, and Franz Wagner. In fact, you make the argument, as I did in segment 1, that he's better than some, if not all of those guys. That said, it's unfortunate relative to his draft position, because if you did flip him, if you flip those guys and Sengun was taken number 2 overall, I think the Rockets probably just signed the check and he's good to go, because that amount from where Jalen is at 31.2 on his cap hold to 38.6, $7 million, it's kind of negligible in the grand scheme of things. So if Jalen Green had an all-star caliber year, if he took a year 3 leap the same way Sengun did, he's probably getting that max contract extension, and that's it, right? There's no discussion, there's no negotiation, there's no pressure, none of that. It happens, and the Rockets move forward with him as one of their cornerstones. It's not that the Rockets don't believe in Sengun. It's not that they're not bought in on his ability, his production, his talent level, all that. For all intents and purposes, my understanding is the Rockets, especially with Ime Udoka, there were some doubts. There were definitely some doubts internally within the organization about Sengun, about his long-term fixture as a part of the Houston Rockets, some concerns, whatever. But I think a lot of those were erased this past season. Ime Udoka really embraced Sengun and understands how talented he is and how capable he is as a blossoming star in this league. But Ime isn't the front office, right? Ime doesn't have carte blanche executive power to make whatever decisions he wants. He believes in Sengun. He likes what he can do on the court, all that stuff. The Rockets front office has to do their part in figuring out the finances and making it all work and making it all mesh together. And that's why I think as it stands right now, Jalen Green, there's too many question marks about him so far. He's been too inconsistent in his first 3 years in the NBA. That's why he's not getting the extension. It's just because he just hasn't earned it. For Sengun, it's relative to his draft position. It's relative to what the Rockets are going to try to accomplish in summer 2025. And the argument here is that $22 million difference, whatever, in his cap hold versus what the number would be if they just gave him the outright extension, similar to Scotty and Cade and Franz now. The argument is that Sengun has earned it, right? And that it would look good for the organization, that it's kind of like a show of faith, right? To just, hey, Sengun, you're our guy, right? We're bought in. We believe in you. You're our cornerstone. You're our building block, or you're one of our building blocks moving forward. Here's your extension. And then he can feel good about himself. He can come into year 4 and just focus on playing and being the best version of himself. I get that. And honestly, I'm at a place where if the Rockets did elect to go that route and they said, you know what, screw it, we're not worried about the extra cap space. we recognize that we have an insane talent on our hands in Alperen Sengun, and we want to do right by him, take care of our guy. We're bought in on him long term. I'd be cool with it. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like that's how the Rockets front office has operated historically. It's not how they operated under Daryl Morey. It doesn't feel like that's how they've operated under Alperen Sengun, under Rafael Stone. They have constantly preached and maintained optionality, flexibility, and so I highly doubt that we're going to see them commit to either of these guys for the reasons that I've already laid out. And I want to highlight here, the last time we talked about these contracts, I got some pushback because people were saying, oh, well, the 2025 free agent class is there's no good names. There's nobody out there. There's nobody worthy of going and signing at a max deal and spending, $50 or $60 million on. Well, here's some news. If you have all that cap space, you don't have to go sign a free agent with that cap space. You can just trade for a star player. If there's a star player on the market who's making $40, $50, $60 million even next summer, and if the Rockets have all that cap space to work with, you can just absorb a player directly, or multiple players for that matter, directly into that cap space. And that's where things, and this is where we're gonna get real nerdy here for a second, but if the Rockets make no changes this next year, if they don't make any major trades, if they don't do anything this next season, and if all they do is they're bringing back, or if the only names on their payroll spreadsheet are Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, and then the core seven, so Jalen, Sengun, Jabari, Tari, Amin, Cam, and Reed. So 9 guys on payroll. If that's all they have, they're going to have a payroll of $154.9 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money on the spreadsheet. Basically zero cap space to work with. Now, things get really interesting. If you decline Fred VanVleet's third-year option, it opens up close to $45 million. That would give the Rockets about exactly $45.1 million in cap space to work with. Now, the problem is, are they willing to, or are they ready to potentially lose Fred VanVleet for nothing? I would hope that they'd be at least exploring the possibility of re-signing Fred VanVleet at a cheaper annual value, something like 20 to 25 million a year, where he can still be a part of the team, maybe still even start. It just kind of depends on how Reed Sheppard looks. Maybe Reed Sheppard's ready to take the reins in year 2. Who knows? But declining Fred VanVleet's option is one pathway to opening up a lot of cap space. Trading or offloading Dillon Brooks' salary is yet another way to open up another $21.1 million worth of cap space. If the Rockets were able to, maybe midway through this season, they feel confident and comfortable with the idea of Tari Eason becoming the new starting small forward, or maybe Amin Thompson, right? And in some way, right, some combination of Tari, Jabari, and Amin, they're okay with that being kind of their wing trifecta of the future. And maybe even AJ Griffin, maybe he shows something, right? And the Rockets are like, you know what? Thank you, Dillon, for your services. We don't need you anymore. If they can trade Dillon Brooks and receive back no long-term salary, then that's another potentially $21 million off the books. If all they do is get rid of Fred or decline Fred's option and manage to trade Dillon, and then they still have Jalen Green's cap hold and Alperen Sengun's cap hold, so no extensions for them, that puts the Rockets at $66.2 million of cap space. That's a lot of room to be able to add a marquee player. Just absorb them directly into your salary cap space, and then you pair them with an already exciting young core of talent, right? That would be probably the perfect scenario for the Houston Rockets. And then you can get into some other scenarios, right? Like, what if they did extend Jalen Green this offseason, or what if they did extend Alperen Sengun this offseason, and what the numbers would ultimately look like. I've got like 12 different rows of data here. All these different possibilities for what the Rockets could or might not do with their contracts and how it impacts next summer. But I think the really big takeaway here is just, I think that Sengun has basically absolutely earned, like, barring anything catastrophic happening this next year, like a major injury, which that's the other part of the argument from Sengun's perspective, right? Like, if he has another substantial injury this next year and doesn't have the rookie scale extension, then that hurts his long-term earnings, right? If he gets the extension now, and then, God forbid, knock on wood, something bad happens this next year, he has that money in hand. And so that's a level of security for the player, for their representation, for the agent, all that they would love to have. rather than being forced to go out and prove it one more year, or have one more year with no injuries, no setbacks, no regression in his game, all that stuff. For Jalen Green, he has to go out there and prove it, right? He has to go out there and showcase his skills and start the year off strong rather than, struggling for 2/3 of the season and turning it on really late. But I think there's a very valid argument here that the Rockets are going to have to take a really hard look at Jalen Green this next season, because if he doesn't show something, if he doesn't show a vastly improved version of himself, if he doesn't come in and play closer to the level that he was at to end this past season, then there's a world where moving on from him at the trade deadline and getting something of value back, whatever, might make more sense, because his cap hold is pretty significant. And if you looked at a world where the Rockets were able to eliminate Jalen Green's cap hold, so just trading him, getting back no salary for him, whatever, in addition to the moves that they could make with Dillon Brooks and with Fred VanVleet, or actually let's factor those guys in. Let's say Fred VanVleet signs a new contract with the Rockets for $25 million a year, something like that. Relatively team-friendly deal relative to what he was making, but for longer years, whatever. And let's say Dillon Brooks is still on the roster. If they didn't extend Alperen Sengun, but if all they did was trade Jalen Green and didn't take back any crazy long-term salary, the Rockets would still have $51 million in cap space to work with. That's a lot. That's a lot to be able to commit to a player. That's a lot to be able to go out and outright sign somebody, or that's a lot to be able to absorb a maximum contract guy directly into the fold. So there's a lot of different avenues that this go, a lot of different ways that this could ultimately, a lot of different pathways the Rockets could take here. I think it's all about the fact that they have so much young talent on this team, and Sengun has clearly cemented himself as the best player on this team, but because of his current salary situation, that feels like the reason why the Rockets haven't extended him. If he was in a different position, if he was drafted a little bit higher, I feel like the Rockets would just bite the bullet and say, forget about the $7 million or whatever, because at the end of the day, you're only going to be able to max so many guys on this roster. If the Rockets decide that Sengun is one of their guys worthy of maxing, then you're going to have one more max contract that you can reasonably hand out to somebody else on this young core. A lot of Rockets fans have pegged Amen Thompson as the other guy that's probably got the most superstar upside of anybody else in this Rockets young core. But what happens if Jabari Smith Jr. takes a crazy year 3 leap, right? What if he suddenly looks, he took a pretty substantial leap after a really rough rookie season. He took a pretty big leap in year 2. What if he takes yet another leap in year 3? What if Cam Whitmore looks like a superstar all of a sudden after his insane production as a rookie, right? You're going to have to figure out, and this is why I think the Rockets are being so cautious and so careful about ultimately who they decide to give that money to, because they just haven't been able to identify who are the 2 pieces of the young core that we want to build around. They pretty clearly have one in Alperen Sengun, and I'm sure they've got to feel pretty good about having that one. They've got to figure out who the second one is, though. And at this point, it doesn't feel like it's Jalen Green. I hope he proves me wrong next season. I hope he comes out and has a fantastic year, and then the Rockets can feel really good about maxing Sengun and Jalen, and then their Houston Rockets for years to come. That would be the best case scenario for this team. But as it stands right now, there's just not a good enough reason to commit that money to either of them right now. For very different reasons across the board. Jalen because of the question marks, and Sengun because, again, that $22 million that you could save, or at least keep open, I should say, between now and next summer, to be able to make a significant move, or to be able to add one significant piece or multiple, rotational pieces to really elevate the team and take it to another level, that's going to be important. You really can't turn your nose up at that. So I wanted to hopefully do it some justice, spend a little bit more time in it, in discussing it, and kind of tackle some of the financial ramifications, getting into the numbers. I know I threw a lot of numbers at you guys just now. I'm so sorry about that. It was probably numbers overload at the end of the day. You can only, I'm staring at this Excel spreadsheet in front of me with 12 different rows of data and all these numbers, and I'm getting kind of my vision's getting a little blurry staring at all of it. But with that coming up, do want to talk about Well, actually, I want your thoughts on the extension discussion, right? Let me know how you feel. What do you want to see the Rockets do in regards to Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun? And again, are the Rockets under pressure, right? Because if you get more guys, right? If Evan Mobley gets his extension, if Josh Giddey gets his extension, right? How many other extensions are potentially going to be handed out for the 2021 draft class, where then, Jalen and Sengun start to turn the heat up on the organization, potentially wanting some clarity on their situation with the Rockets moving forward. Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Coming up, I want to talk about Jabari Smith Jr. working out with Kevin Durant, what a year 3 leap looks like for Jabari, plus some housekeeping as the Rockets make get a few re-signings done ahead of NBA Summer League. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, so here in our final segment, we've got a little bit of stuff to get to. Jabari Smith Jr. was working out with Kevin Durant. Saw some clips of them doing some drills, kind of an open gym environment. And first thing to note is, it is crazy how similar they both look as far as just their build, right? Their size, their physique. Obviously, both really lengthy, kind of like, KD's listed at 6'10", but KD's a 7-footer. Like, when you see KD listed next to other guys that are 6'10", 6'11", whatever, and he's like towering over them by like a few inches, KD's a legit 7-footer. Jabari might be a legit 7 feet by now. I feel like he kept growing a little bit. But just seeing both of them, right, the way they move, the way they pull up for their shots, the way their release point is so high above them, basically unblockable, unguardable, if you will. But the stark contrast in their games is how smooth, how fluid KD looks with the basketball. Whereas when Jabari is doing things, you can tell that it's just not as swift, not as smooth, not as fluid. And again, that's not a knock on Jabari. It's just like, that's just because KD is elite, right? That's why KD is one of the all-time greats. That's why he's one of the greatest scorers to have ever played the game of basketball. But you see the possibility there. And that's why I absolutely loved the fact that Jabari is in the gym this summer, working with KD, learning from him, trying to emulate parts of his game, trying to copy parts of his game, because that's how you get better, right? And we saw Jabari this past year look a lot better when it came to, attacking off closeouts, right? Putting the ball on the floor, being able to drive and finish at the rim, using his length to finish around defenders or scoring over the top of defenders. And maybe Jabari's never going to be Kevin Durant, and that's okay, right? Kevin Durant's an all-time great. That's a very, very high bar, a high standard to set for a kid who's, barely 21 years old. But at the same time, if he can start to pick up on some of those things, if he can tighten up that handle a little bit, get a little bit more comfortable facing up his defender, going off the dribble and getting into, some of his pull-up game, or getting to a step back at the three-point line, like, the sky really is the limit for Jabari. He has all the physical gifts, all the tools there to become a deadly scoring option. And that's why I'm still so bought in on Jabari and his ceiling as a player, because you already see the level of impact that he can have defensively. I feel like he took some major strides there last season, more comfortable guarding out on the perimeter, moving his feet laterally, and then on the interior, right, playing bigger. He had that stretch where it felt like he was just all over the glass at various points last season. Then he had the ankle injury, and he was out for a few games and then came back, and it didn't feel like he had the same lift, the same explosiveness around the rim to try and get up and contest for rebounds and be active on the glass. And that was a bit disappointing in that regard. But I really do think that with Jabari, if he's put in the right positions to succeed this next season, if the Rockets kind of are able to highlight some of his strengths a little bit more and kind of let him take on a slightly bigger role offensively, I think he can surprise some people. Again, maybe he's never going to be Kevin Durant. And again, I don't want to force him to try to be Kevin Durant, but I think 20 a game is like a realistic possibility for him, right? Like at his peak, something like 20 to 25 points a night with 10 to 12 rebounds is very attainable. And if I pull up and if I look at his stats from this past season, I just want to double check and be able to reference them from this past year, right? He averaged 13.7 points per game, 8.1 rebounds, shot 36.3% from downtown and 81% at the line. I mean, a 6-point jump seems pretty significant, and that's probably a little unrealistic, especially with kind of how many mouths to feed there are on the Rockets roster. But there were definitely points last year where it felt like the Rockets were hurting for an additional offensive option. Now, a big part of that is because, they only had three guys that could realistically create offense for others consistently, and that was Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, and Alperen Sengun. And again, Jalen really struggled for a big chunk of the year, so you have to factor that into things as well. But if Jabari can just get a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more confident with creating for himself, right? Whether it's, attacking on the wings, spotting up on the perimeter, putting the ball on the floor and creating for himself in one-on-one in isolation, or just putting his back against a defender, right? At the at the top of the, at the high post or on the low block, and just getting to his little turnaround game, or facing up a defender at the elbow and then making a move out of that. Like, there's so many different spots that you could put him on the floor to let him be effective. I really want to see Ime Udoka continue to experiment with that and really unlock what he can do, because I really do think there's something there. And so that's kind of what I'm looking forward to for Jabari. Really all that's going to separate him from becoming a poor man's KD is that handle. Now, KD handles the ball like a guard. That's a lot to expect for Jabari Smith Jr., who is a bit more of he's got some rigidity to his game, right? He doesn't have a lot of wiggle to his game. But if he can just get to a place where he's, a little bit more comfortable with the ball, he doesn't ever have to have, a bag like Kyrie Irving or Chris Paul or something where he has the ball on a string and he's able to crazy manipulate it. But just being a little bit more comfortable, getting a little bit lower on his dribbles, being able to add, a couple counters to his game, it's going to go a long way because he's already basically unguardable when he elevates for that shot. All he has to do is get a little bit quicker with his decision making, and if he can get to a place where he can reliably attack a defender who's just face up, set in his defensive stance, and if he can create out of that, it'll mean more opportunities for him offensively, and it'll also mean more opportunities to create for his teammates, and that's going to be a big one. That's where you see guys really start to take the next level as stars in the NBA, is when they're able to leverage their threat to score the ball, their scoring gravity, into opportunities for their teammates, right? Commanding a double team by either driving and collapsing the defense or drawing a double team if you're facing up, at the elbow, or if you're posting up down low, whatever, things that we see Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun already doing. I feel like we could see some of that for Jabari Smith Jr. this next season. That's kind of what I would hope to see. I want to see him take on a bigger role offensively this next year. Now, a lot of that's obviously going to be up to Ime Udoka, but that's my hope for year 3. Jabari Smith Jr. is taking on a bigger role offensively, being entrusted to do a little bit more offensively, and we could see an uptick where maybe this next year, 18 and 10 are probably realistic benchmarks for Jabari for this next season. That doesn't feel too far out of the realm of possibility. Again, an extra 4.5 points and a couple extra rebounds per game. I feel like that's at least a fair guess this early on. But and then playing on the USA Select team, him and Amin Thompson, that's going to be an invaluable experience for both of those guys. The USA Select team does a lot to help prepare young players for kind of the next step in their growth, their evolution. And it's always nice to have that competitive edge to play against some of the other talented young guys from the association. And if the USA Select team is able to go out there and play against the actual US team and beat them a couple times, then you get ultimate bragging rights to talk about too. Last couple things here. Rockets did re-sign Nate Williams to a 2-way deal, and then they put Nate Hinton and Jermaine Samuels Jr. on Exhibit 10 contracts. So basically, the Exhibit 10 deals, you just call them summer league deals or training camp deals, is basically what they are. I do maintain that the Rockets do really like Nate Williams. I don't know if he'll ever break into a full-scale NBA contract, but he's kind of a nice, injury insurance wing policy to have on the roster. He's a high-energy guy. He's a solid defender, really solid finisher around the rim. The outside shooting's a major question mark with him, but those are a few of the names that Rockets fans got familiar with last year in garbage time minutes and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, former UH product Nate Hinton. So those three guys are all going to make their, they'll all be a part of the Houston Rockets Summer League team this time around. My guess is, of those three names, I would fully expect Nate Williams to probably get the starting nod alongside Reed Shepherd, Cam Whitmore, AJ Griffin, and oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name. Dante, there we go, the big man. I don't want to butcher his first name. Nafali Dante, there we go. I didn't want to butcher his name. I think I got it right. That's what I get for not having it up to date in my on my roster spreadsheet in front of me. But that's probably your projected starting five lineup for Summer League. Maybe Jermaine Samuels Jr. gets the starting nod above Nate Williams because he's a little bit bigger, maybe more capable of playing that 4 spot. But we'll see. Ultimately, it's going to be a fun Summer League roster, and all those guys play with so much energy, so much intensity. It's always a ton of fun to watch them compete at Summer League. And at the end of the day, they're all great guys too. So will they ever make it to, a consistent NBA scale contract, NBA scale deal? If it's not with the Rockets, I would still love to see them be able to be success stories with another organization, right? Like if Nate Hinton balls out in Summer League and then some other team wants to roll up and offer him a standard NBA contract, more power to him, right? Would love to see that happen. But that's going to do it for our episode today. I'm curious your thoughts. Drop anything you have for me in the YouTube comments. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review helps us out a ton. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.